Virtual reality, the holy grail of gaming. We're here live from Austin at South by Southwest Interactive. My name is Nate Mitchell. I'm going to be the moderator for the panel. I'm on the product team at Oculus. And I'm up here with some legendary game designers and hardware designers in the industry. I'm going to let them take care of their own introductions. So, Cliff, you want to get started?
Sure, I'm Cliff Bleszinski, former design director at Epic Games, 21-year veteran of the business. Right now, currently unemployed, FYI, if anybody's hiring and things like that. Honestly, it's my first South by Southwest Interactive. I love Austin. It's an amazing town. I'm honored to be on this panel with these gentlemen. And I'm a big fan of VR. Ever since the promise came around in the 90s and then kind of went away, I think we have a great shot of this coming back in a big way.
I'm Paul Bettner. I'm the former CEO of New Toy, then Zynga with Friends, created Words with Friends most recently, and have a new studio now, and also extremely excited about VR.
My name's Palmer Luckey. I'm the founder of Oculus and the designer of the Rift. I'm obviously a fan of virtual reality.
Hi, I'm Chris Roberts. I created a game called Wing Commander and a few other space games a while ago. And I'm back making a game called Star Citizen, which I'm hoping to use a lot of the stuff that Palmer's building at Oculus, because I'm a big fan of VR too.
Awesome. So just jumping right into things, virtual reality has really captured the imaginations of everyone, from books and movies to games. VR has really permeated our culture. And after a few false starts, in the last year we've really seen a resurgence in virtual reality technology, especially in the games industry, starting really back when John Carmack demoed Doom 3 in VR at E3. So just for those that are unfamiliar with the Oculus Rift, Palmer, maybe could you do a really short introduction?
Sure, yeah. The Oculus Rift is a high-performance virtual reality headset that we launched on Kickstarter. It's designed specifically for gaming, and it's something that gamers can actually afford.
Awesome.
Have you done that before?
Yeah, actually, yeah, I practiced it like
Just
a
went
bunch
right
right
into
before
it.
this.
Muscle memory right there.
So everyone on the panel supported the Kickstarter in one way or another. Can you guys tell me a little bit about why, as game developers, you backed the Kickstarter? Maybe starting with you, Cliff.
Yeah, I believe there's two types of people when it comes to the Oculus Rift. Those who haven't seen it yet and those who see it and believe. Because once you put that headset on and you go into whatever other world is depicted, you're like, oh, boom, done. It's like the first time you saw IMAX or something like that. It really is that impressive. And since the 90s, when I remember reading this Rolling Stone article about VR and seeing The Lawnmower Man, any of you guys remember that movie, right? Yeah, and I'm like, this is right around the corner, 15, 20 years later. And I think as a designer, the kind of experiences you can create, yes, you can make games that are compelling, but you can also make just experiences that make people feel something as well. So, I mean, what this encapsulates is so much broader than what the typical video game spectrum is.
So, for me, I backed the Oculus right when it hit. So this was before I'd seen it, before I had any idea whether you guys actually got it right or not. And I think I was the first the top level
You
backer.
might have been, yeah.
Yeah, because I remember getting an email from you guys after I had already reached out and made contact and said, hey, I want to come visit you. And I got another email that was like, you hadn't put those two things together, that I was also a backer. But anyway, the thing is, like, when I saw what you guys had done, and you did a great job of hyping it up in the beginning before I'd seen it, it was just, like Cliff was saying, it's the thing I've been dreaming about since I read Neuromancer or Snow Crash or these things, and I was like, okay, this is what's going to happen. We're not going to be making games in the future. We're going to be building dreams. We're going to be creating these worlds, and I just wanted to believe, so I backed you guys. Then I flew out and I saw that it was actually real and that it exceeded our expectations. Which, I mean, coming out there, I really had high expectations. So,
Well, I guess from my perspective, I didn't create the Rift because I wanted to start a virtual reality company. I created it because I wanted virtual reality to be something that actually happened. If I'd been able to go to Best Buy and buy some Ultra VR 2000 headset for a couple $100, I wouldn't have wanted to make something. I just wanted to buy something, and making the Rift happened to be the best way to go about that. It's really cool because the hardware is finally there. It's not like it's not like I've come up with something that is just like mind-blowing and people say, wow, how did you come up with this? You know, why you? The reality is that if the technology had been like it is now, where you have high-resolution mobile displays and really, really cheap motion trackers, if you had those back in the 80s, 90s, somebody else would have done this. It's not a matter of inventing the hardware so much as is the hardware finally being ready to make a good run at VR.
Real quick, there's a life lesson here with what Palmer's doing. He's doing this because of the love of what he's doing it. And then later, if he happens to make money on it, great. But he does it out of his heart, which is really important, right?
Thank you, Cliff.
Chris?
So, well, I mean, for me, if anyone's ever played my games, they'll know that immersion is like one of the biggest things for me in anything. And I can't think of anything more immersive than being inside a virtual reality environment. And of course, in a Wing Commander style or in a Star Citizen game, you sit in a cockpit. So looking around is exactly what you need to do to be able to actually have a better immersive and playable environment. So I backed the Rift when it first came out before I met Palmer and the Oculus guys. You know, I was tracking it because John Carmack was raving about the tech all the way back at E3 and was giving demos. And I was like, you know, I've known John for a long time and he doesn't rave about something unless it's really good. So I backed it because, yeah, I mean, and it's also, by the way, it's something that I've always been very keen on, is I think the PC in general is very good at being able to bring new peripherals in and bring them into the gaming ecosystem. And I think it really is exciting if you're ever developing anything to try new things to sort of push, you know, what you can do with the game. So I'm a big believer, and I'm very looking forward to getting my developer kit and flying around in this cockpit somewhere in space.
Awesome. So you guys are all famous game designers, except for you, Palmer. You know, what sort of new design opportunities does virtual reality and having the player actually in the game rather than controlling a character in the world, what sort of design opportunities does that open up? And whoever can jump in, you know, feel free. Yell over each other.
Well, I'll take it right. I mean, because we've had that discussion. I mean, for me, I've always felt like the less that you can make any kind of game feel like a game, and it feels more like whatever the environment you're in is better. So having the ability that you just naturally look around and your environment sort of feels like it's around you makes it far more immersive, and then it sort of opens up a lot of sort of things in gameplay that you don't, like normally you have to think about control mechanisms and using a keyboard or a mouse to map things, and that's not naturally natural, so people have to sort of learn the techniques. So like, you know, I'm sure there were people who were gaming that originally were working on a keyboard and a mouse on PCs and first-person shooters, and they're like, I'd never be able to use a game controller to be a first-person shooter. Now you'll have a whole bunch of people that say, oh, I can't ever use a mouse or a keyboard, it has to be a gamepad, because that's what they used to from consoles. And something like the Oculus sort of removes all that sort of learning, because it's just sort of instinctive. I mean, if you're in an environment, you know, you instinctively look around and you can see it there, and so you can sort of remove the interface, and the more you remove the interface, it allows other things to open up in the game design that you can sort of focus on, and then, you know, the experience just becomes more connective, and then at that point you really sort of feel like you're there, and I think that's what it's about. I mean, I think in general, in any kind of, if you're making a game, even if you're making a movie, it's all about removing, it's that suspension of disbelief. You just think that you're in the world, and having VR allows you to do that to a level that you can't. And there's a lot of other exciting things that I think Palmer's been looking at, and I think other people are playing, where you can sort of combine both the headset or tracking someone's hand, so you can actually see your hand in the virtual environment, interacting with the virtual environment, and the possibilities with the stuff like the VR headset and Leap and all the rest of the stuff that's happening. I think it's going to be a great, you know, next 5 years. You're going to see some amazing stuff, and the price points are low enough now that, yeah, $300 for a headset, if you actually put it on and play it and see how that's like and what the difference it will change. I mean, people will spend $400 or $500 for a new video card in a PC, so I definitely think you will do this. I mean, I certainly will. I think the biggest challenge is how you manage to get people to experience it themselves, because you can't put it on a stage here and feel what it's like. But that's
just to comment on that, the best way is to get, you know, people like these guys talking about it, because, you know, if you can't try it themselves, at least people trust people like you, right? Right, Cliffy?
I think first you get a bus, and then you put a Rift on the bus, and you send it around to every college campus in America, and let everybody have a chance with it. And then my big thing is when I think about the experiences I want with this, I think, you know, I saw some videos of some hackers who kind of put some first-person shooters that exist on it. Those were cool. You know, playing a Team Fortress 2 would be cool. And that's nice, but I want to see the dedicated experiences crafted for this. You know, you look at Kinect, for example. I don't really care about giving voice commands to Mass Effect 3, no offense. Dance Central is a game that's completely 100% built for that. And so if you dump a game on it, it'll be okay, but when you sit there and pace the game, if you make a shooter that has a different pacing, much like Bungie knew when they were using the Xbox controller, they couldn't make a game that was paced like Quake. They'd have to make it for the thumbsticks. It's a whole different level of pacing for this level of experience. And I think there's going to be multiple types of games you have where you can have a shorter span in more intense game, like a paintball game that you play, you know, 3 to 5 minute rounds, take a break. And then there's going to be games like a Myst-like game where you're slowly exploring an island and unlocking its secrets. And then, you know, I want to play a scuba diving game. I want to play a flying game. I'm curious what the adult applications are for this. That's right, I said it. Everything within the spectrum there, because when you're basically going into a dream or almost another dimension, it's pure magic, honestly. I know I'm a person who's big on hype, but I think you should really believe the hype of this project.
So I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm going to say this anyway. So we've been playing with our Rift kits for a little while now, and it's crazy when. So you asked from a developer standpoint, you don't realize until you start actually thinking about it as a developer, and you're wearing this thing, and you're like you start realizing, thinking about the kind of games you can make, that you've actually lost almost as many things as you've gained. But that's great, you know. The things that you've gained make for an extremely powerful experience. But when I talk about lost, like. So I made Words with Friends. If I wanted to make a board game in this environment, like if I'm making a board game for a new console or for mobile, like I'm just going to make the board, right? If I want to make a board game in VR, first I have to build the whole world. Then I can put a board on a table, and then I can have pieces on that board, and then you can play. And like realizing that, and realizing that all these things that you used to think about as a game developer, about camera control, like you were saying, about motion and moving, just picking up the player and moving him somewhere else, cut scenes, all this stuff just goes right out the window. Right? Yeah, and like it's replaced by an even more powerful set of tools. And what I mean by that is like, for me as a game developer, all I ever want to do is make somebody feel something. And holy crap, can you make somebody feel something with this? I mean, like, my favorite thing to do with our little kit is to put somebody in our little test game and walk them up to a ledge, and then they say, oh, look over there, and then I just hit the keyboard and push them over the ledge and just watch what happens. And they freak out. Everybody universally freaks out, just falling like 10 feet. And I see that, and I'm like, those are the experiences. When you talk about the native experiences, those are the things that you can make somebody feel with VR that you just didn't even have access to as a game developer before this.
So in that light, you know, all of you guys have designed multiplayer experiences, and well, except for you, Palmer. And Chris, you know, Star Citizen is planned to be sort of massively multiplayer. Paul, you know, Words with Friends, obviously multiplayer inherently. What do you guys think, how is multiplayer impacted by VR? How do you see those two, you know, complementing one another?
I mean, I think if the game, of course, as I said, is built and paced for it, suddenly it becomes a very different and unique experience where, you know, the social experience of, you know, playing Guild Wars 2, and I see my friends running around as these tiny little things with an icon over their head, and we all know that's fun, right, the shared experience. Suddenly when you take it from being over there and in third person and this 5-pixel tall character, and you put it down and you can see your body, and you walk up and I'm like, hey, Paul, check out the new threads. Are you like this? How's it going? And then all of a sudden a dragon comes up and eats his head and he gets pulled off, and I'm like, holy shit, Paul, what happened to you? I have to go save you. Like, that level of impact is that much more just real for you at that point. And I think that the idea of a shared space that is essentially in your head is also very, very compelling. And I think the amount of people you could render, I mean, just imagine being you and I are like the assassins walking into the busy nightclub and nobody knows our identity. I'm like, okay, signaling to him, you know, we don't want people to catch on. He goes around to the right, I go around to the left, and we take out the target. Like, that's like, you know, people could wind up becoming best friends in this thing, I think, honestly.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that we discovered with the Oculus and using them on a daily basis is it's actually kind of lonely. When you're in a world and there's nobody else in there, it's different than sitting in your couch and playing on the TV, because somebody could walk into the room. When you put this on, you know that you are, you know, in this world, and when there's nobody else there, it's made me believe that fundamentally people are going to want multiplayer games where they see other people, or they're going to start to feel lonely in the games that they play in VR.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just think it, like I was saying before, it's just going to remove one level of sort of thinking about doing things in the multiplayer experience. So, you know, like the way Cliffy was describing the Guild Wars 2 experience there, if I was doing that normally, I would have to be consciously turning my head to my friend and sort of talking and chatting. So I see there's going to be a huge amount of possibility in terms of just sort of the natural thing you do. Like if you walk into I walked in here with Cliffy, we'd like look to each other and say something, and it would be pretty natural. I wouldn't have to be moving my joystick to the right to turn my head or my mouse to the right. And I think those are all the things that will enable, and I definitely agree with you, Paul, is that on the shared experience, you definitely, I think when you're in a VR experience, you actually want to share it with other people more so than you would in a single player experience, because you definitely do feel more alone, because when you put it on, it is amazing, but you are fully enveloped in that world. So I actually think it will probably be better for that sort of more shared social experience than a single player. I mean, I think it will be good for single player, but I think it will really come alive in the sort of multiplayer social, and you'll have fun, because for me, I'm actually not someone that's like a huge MMO player that has spent 10 years playing World of Warcraft or EVE Online or anything. But the fun I've had the most is when I play multiplayer games with my friends, like Battlefield 3, where I'm doing things with them and we work together cooperatively to achieve stuff. And I really think that's something that the Rift is going to really help take it to a whole new level. And I think it'll be pretty awesome. I'm looking forward to doing it anyway.
So I just wanted to mention the next prototype R&D thing that I'm excited to work on is throw and catch, and it's ridiculous, right? But like,
are you gonna make a Field of Dreams sim and make all of us cry?
No. But like, I played Unreal Tournament, the demo you guys had, and it was overwhelmingly intense to have people shooting at your head when you're like fully. I was like, it's just too much. And I think we'll all get used to it as gamers, probably eventually. But it has pushed me as a developer to want to like really back away from that and realize like this is a super intimate experience, especially I think when another person materializes in front of you. And I think just reaching out and handing that person something or picking up and tossing something to them is going to be such a compelling experience unto itself that I think we may stop there for a while before we go to these insane experiences where you're running around with 400-pound guns shooting each other.
That is a brilliant point, because right now, video games, if they were 3D movies, everything would be the equivalent of that arrow coming at you that everybody hates now, and having to get back and peel those layers
cheap
back.
effects where they would jab
it's like,
something in the camera.
Look, and everyone's like, whoa, it's 3D, this is great. I actually think a lot of the default games, like, I think about even putting Slender Man on this. Slender Man is terrifying enough. Okay, now if you put the headset on and play Slender Man, I think you're actually going to be really careful with the action moments and the pacing moments. You just made me think the game I want is the one where I'm Iron Man and I'm carrying Pepper Potts and like flying through, or that Superman type moment, and then you just kind of drop her and then just try to fly down and catch her again. Just all those little moments I think could be very compelling.
So, talking about playing catch, and Chris, you've touched on this, some of the neat technology that people like Leap are doing. What do you guys think are going to be the key input devices for VR? So you've got the visual and you've got the head tracking, but how do you actually control your player in the world? I think that's a big question that gamers ask. Is it keyboard and mouse? Is it gamepad?
No.
Is it something else?
The key input device is hands, and it's up to you guys to make that work, okay?
Imagine that, right? You put the headset on, you look down, and all of a sudden you have these gauntlets on. Or like I said, you are Iron Man or the Hulk or something, and you have the Hulk fists. You're like, yeah, let's do this. Like, that is insane.
We tried, we were first experimenting, the same with you guys with an Xbox controller. We moved on to using a Razer Hydra. And even that, the ability to like see this thing that you're holding in the VR, that even if it is in your hand, like we just have a representation of your hand being gripped around this thing, it is a whole nother level beyond just using a controller and being a floating head.
Well, when you use the controller, you go back to your gamer instincts, because when I was playing the old Doom demo, and I could turn my head around the corner, eventually I'm like, well, I can just move the right thumbstick. Like, so once they have that opportunity, they tend to use the path of least resistance, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I definitely think Leap and, I mean, the kind of stuff, I mean, you've been talking about, like, having even, say, a joystick. I mean, like, in my case, you generally fly a spaceship, which is pretty naturally with a joystick. So, and you're sitting if you're in a spaceship, you're sitting in a cockpit, so you expect to be seated. So if you have a joystick and we can actually track where your hand is and you can see it go on the joystick, or if we have Leap and we can track and we can show you, bring the buttons, I think that's, to me, would be sort of the Lawnmower Man moment, at least in the game I'm building, where you would really feel connected to that virtual reality. But I definitely think that anything that, like the next stage of peripherals is going to be peripherals that are sort of tracking their position in 3D space, so they can feed back into what you're doing in the engine and coming out in something like the Oculus Rift.
Yeah, ever since you guys announced that you guys were bringing it to the Rift, for me, you guys are making the ideal game, or one of the ideal games for it, because when you're at the Rift, you're sitting in a chair. So if the game actually has you sitting in a chair, it works really well. It's tough when the games have you running around a corridor, and especially and Cliff, you're partly responsible for this. FPSs now, you move around at like 35 miles an hour. That makes you really sick when you're wearing this thing and you're zooming down a corridor at 40 miles an hour. That's not something your body is used to. That's the kind of thing we have to rethink now.
Murder ball the game.
Well, I wanted to, Chris, you said, we really need a new interfaces for this and things that can track your hands. And, you said we're going to need, hands are going to be the interface. So, man, thanks for putting a lot of pressure on. I mean, come on.
You'll figure it out.
But it's absolutely true. Virtual reality, you don't want to be using a gamepad. You don't want to be using a traditional interface like a keyboard and mouse. I mean, I'm a keyboard and mouse fan over gamepad, hands down. But a keyboard and a mouse, they're superhuman interfaces. They do things you could never do in real life. So when you try to make the most realistic experience possible, it doesn't make sense to be using an interface like a gamepad that cripples you or a mouse that gives you superhuman abilities. There's going to need to be some kind of unified control scheme for virtual reality that can do 3D tracking of the position of your hands and of your hands so that you can interact in that way. And that's something that would be very cool.
And for what it's worth, I think hands are the ideal end goal, but the Razer Hydra, something like that where you're holding a tool, and you guys had originally told me you should try that, it works surprisingly well. I mean, you're obviously somewhat limited in the things you can do, but just the ability to move a tool around and then turn that into something in VR it gets you a lot of the way there.
Yeah, I don't know why we told you to do that. It's almost like we wanted you to explore that.
Sorry, I was just fantasizing about fighting a dragon with a sword and a shield.
Yeah.
You're actually finally stab it in the head.
And then there's another thing too. I mean, like you mentioned that you don't want it to be hands, but you don't necessarily want it to just be hands. There's a lot of things you don't want to have to always use your fingers to do it. And something controllers can give you is haptics. I mean, look at gamepads right now. I mean, shaking hands, they're so next gen, right? But there's things you can do with haptics in a controller that aren't even being explored, like actually replicating the texture of running your hands against a wall, or actually having a feel for individual weapons beyond hand shaking a lot and hand shaking a medium bit, which is about what you get right now, right?
Yeah.
Pressing the flesh.
So, in that vein, I think the Rift provides, at least, as you guys have said, a decent visual experience. But as game developers and as gamers, what other senses would you like to explore in virtual reality?
Well, in regards to peripherals, or in regard like smell-o-vision, or
Everything.
So Palmer's talking about haptics, right? That would be touch.
Okay, so the one that I mentioned, when I first sat down with Palmer and Brennan and we were looking at it, the first thing that came to mind for me was that the idea of the neural interface stuff that we've seen. And there's been some of that comes around because we actually got the cat ears that wiggle and wear them around, and if you're happy, they wiggle, and if you're excited, they go down or whatever. And one of my fantasy scenarios that I would love to see a hacker put together is the flight game where you wear the neural headset, and depending on how relaxed you are, that affects the altitude of how far up you go. And the second you get up super high and you start panicking, you start falling, and you have to force yourself to relax. Like, that kind of combination could be very compelling. And then, of course, once you get haptic feedback, and you go into a kitchen and you pick up the apple, and you feel the apple and you throw it, that's going to be very compelling too. But the neural interface stuff, I think, is very, very exciting.
I think it's all about sound. You guys know, I think that. Have you guys, I'm sure you've seen the virtual haircut, the binaural. Yeah,
of course,
we talked
binaural
about
audio is fantastic.
Yeah, you guys can download it right now actually on your phones. There's an app called the Virtual Haircut. Get a good pair of headphones and wear it. You'll freak out, especially if you close your eyes. It is the VR equivalent for sound. And it's just this technology. It's been around a long time. The first time I experienced it was at Disney World. They had this ride, or this thing you put on these headphones. You'll swear the guy is just walking behind you, cutting your hair.
I think Astound Sound does something similar.
Yeah,
I got to see that GDC, and the second you put the headphone on, you think it's the same guy who put the headphone on, and it's not.
Exactly. It's really freaky.
Freaky, yeah, it's cool.
And it's the obvious combination of that with the head tracking of the Oculus. It's a hard problem. I mean, you need.
Oh, it's incredibly hard. I mean, just to touch it really briefly. With 3D vision in a headset or on a monitor, basically you're just rendering two cameras in game, and you're presenting one view to each eye, and your brain does the rest of the work. I mean, it's not too hard to generate two views, and then your brain figures out all that depth stuff. But with sound, man, is it complex. I mean, sound coming from different plays interferes with your head and the other objects around you in different ways. Even the occlusion just caused by everyone's different ear shapes causes everyone to think that surround sound sounds different. Like, if I recorded a sound that sounded perfect to me, it won't sound good for you, it won't sound good for you, and it won't sound good for you. So, how do you make a game engine that has perfect sound for every single person? But like you said, virtual barbershop, it's just a simple binaural recording, and it's leaps and bounds above what you get from most games out there. So it shows you that there's a lot of room for improvement, even if we won't be able to get it.
And remember,
perfect.
you're already in a chair.
What?
You're already in a chair for the haircut.
That's right.
Yes, that's true.
I'm just really glad that
Hey,
you're
when you-
obviously
virtual-
thinking about all this stuff.
Virtual barbershop app. When are you going to make
That's
it?
right, as long
you're
as you don't
sitting in
move
a
your
chair.
head.
You're getting a virtual haircut.
Starring Ice Cube.
I mean, for me, the one thing, and this is a more difficult one, is that I would really like the motion, the walking around, how you achieve that in a way that's going to sort of feel natural without you actually doing all the, walking physically the distance. Which, I don't know, Palmer, you got any great ideas for that other than sort of an omnidirectional treadmill?
Let me think. Yeah, there's a few things. I mean, omnidirectional treadmills are really cool. Actually, I think I invited you guys to come see one after this, right? I forgot to invite you. You're invited. You want to
All
go
right,
see one?
thank you.
You're coming with us, right?
All right.
All right. Galvanic vestibular stimulation is a technology that allows you to use electrical impulses to simulate your inner ear. That's potentially one way you could do it, where at least it makes you feel like you're moving through space. It won't make it feel like your legs are moving. Then there's all kinds of crazy solutions like, hey, let's stick electrodes all over our whole body and stimulate all the muscles. That's probably
too far.
That's probably too far.
Isn't that how Neo got his muscles back in The Matrix?
Something like that.
Okay.
And then there's stuff like redirected walking, which is an interesting technology where you can take a space that's, let's say, 20 feet by 20 feet, and by taking advantage of certain problems with the human mind, we're pretty good at knowing how we're oriented in space, except for when we do certain things, like if we're focused on a task, or when we're turning, we actually use our visual system to know how far we've turned. Our legs are terrible at knowing. Redirected walking, if you Google it a bit, it's a technique that'll allow you to take this 20 by 20 space, and by a little bit of prediction and a little bit of misdirection, you can actually make people feel like they're in an infinite space and keep walking around forever. That's something that maybe will go somewhere one day. But for now, we're stuck to joysticks and omnidirectional treadmills, maybe.
It actually has made me think about whether we're going to see a resurgence of a next generation arcade being an event space that you go to and you put on the latest VR, and there are omnidirectional treadmills, or 20-foot rooms at least, where we can experience that with other players.
Because there's things that, one of the things that caused the downfall of arcades was that an experience that you used to have to go out to do, you could now all of a sudden do at home, and you could do it better and you could do it cheaper.
Yeah, and the only arcade games that survived were the ones with the dedicated drums and everything, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or Dance Dance Revolution. That's one of the most popular arcade titles out there because it's not something that the average person has the space and money to dedicate to. So maybe you have an arcade resurgence where you have these, omnidirectional treadmills or 20-foot rooms or crazy piece of hardware that you wired yourself in for a few hours for a few bucks an hour. That'd be pretty sweet.
We're definitely building a cockpit on a motion platform, wearing the Oculus VR with the joystick fully built out, that we'll do on Star Citizen. Not this year, but next year. I think we're going to do some tours for the community that's backed it, and we'll let them
Please
sit
open
down
to
and
the public.
If you have the budget, you'll get to experience what it would be like in the dream situation.
You're acting like everyone is going to want it. Who out here would spend like a couple $1,000s on a motion platform? Oh, come on, more hands. All right, that's a decent number of hands.
Watch out, we got a baller.
So we talked a lot about game mechanics now, and Paul, you kind of touched on this. I'm curious to know what you guys think from a storytelling perspective. It sort of falls in line with multiplayer, right? It's like a different experience when you're there with your friends, experience something, than when you just see them on the screen. What do you think in terms of storytelling as game designers? What kind of doors does this open up, and what should we expect to see?
I feel like, for me, I feel like motion pictures were just invented again. Like, I don't even know the language yet. Like, in other words, when films first came out, they didn't even understand you could do cuts. That was just nobody had even figured that out yet. It's the same thing here. Like, my initial reaction is, well, you can't do a cut because in VR, the whole world goes black, and that's really disorienting. So then what do you do if you want to move the player around? You have to move the story to them, or you have to do things that are disorienting. I don't know yet, but
Do
it's
you know,
completely
what
different.
the things I think we can learn from are like the live theater experiences.
I was going
like,
to say, or Disney World.
yeah, and so I'm hoping what this gives us is that same experience you had when you were a teenager and you did the haunted house or the fun house with your friends, right? That as far as the social experience. But there's a live theater thing in New York called Sleep No More, where it's that multi-tiered kind of eyes wide shut experience. And that actually has a lot of the theater that happens as you enter the room and drawers that you can look through and even food you can eat. And I think, off the top of my head, that's one example we could look to. But we haven't even solved storytelling in video games yet.
Right,
So this is some next level stuff, right?
I'll say that so on my side, there's a couple of things that we're going to do in Star Citizen Squadron 42, and it's going to be, if you're doing it with the Rift, it will be better because we're actually trying a paradigm, which I guess you could say, Half-Life and Half-Life 2 did, which is if it's our character, we're in first person, we're not cutting away to third person. So we'll cut away to third person when it's not your character. So you're cutting away to the bad guys talking about doing something or whatever. So, but we're having the idea is to run a whole conversation system where it's based on eye contact. And so obviously VR is perfect for that. If you were playing it on a gamepad or a mouse, you would be moving your head around. But the idea is you look at someone, like in real life, when you look at someone, I've made eye contact, it's sort of like, hey, you want to talk? And then the NPC in the game, like in the single player part of the game, will actually say something to you. And then you'll have the option to sort of hear your inner thought that will sort of direct the conversation, and you sort of select which way. So to give you a sort of a Star Citizen Squadron 42 example, I'd flown a mission and my wingman wasn't very good and almost got me killed. And I walk up after the mission to him and I'm looking at him and he looks and he's like, "Hey man, that was a tough mission." And my inner thought would be, you almost got me killed. You're a screw up, get away from me, or don't worry man, it'll be okay the next time. And I can choose that, and based on that, I'll be talking. But things like if I start to look away, then the NPC's programmed to say, "Hey man, were you not paying attention?" And those kind of moments are much more like real moments in real life. And I think doing that kind of stuff, which is very subtle, but I think will enable sort of the immersion and the storytelling to sort of become more connective, is the sort of thing that I think the Rift will just make much easier, because you won't be thinking about looking around. You'll be sort of in the Rift, you'll be sort of reacting like you normally would be to a conversation, whereas if I have a traditional controller, I'd be consciously having to be sort of moving my head around. And so I just think something like the Rift will sort of remove one of those barriers, so it's just easier to fall into that sort of feeling. And doing those kind of things, I think, will sort of advance the storytelling, the immersion, but it's a very different medium. I mean, you can't make a movie in an interactive experience, and especially when you're doing to something like the Rift, you've got to embrace what you get with the technology, and maybe you're informed and learned by some tricks that they've figured out in movies, because they've had 100 years to figure it out, and in the game business we've had maybe 30 years to figure out what we're doing. So we're not nearly as mature as they are, but ultimately I think the interactive sort of world immersion and even sort of ability to sort of tell stories and engage you will be more powerful than sort of traditional linear medium, just because it's you. It's going it's not, the biggest challenge in a movie is always getting the audience to care about the main character, or and they don't even have to like the main character. They have to be interested in what the main character is doing. Whereas in a game or in a interactive environment, you always are going to care about what you're doing because it's you. So you've already gotten rid of that problem. So what the challenge is how to get rid of all the parts that sort of get in the way currently with the limitation of the technology or the interface. And something like the Rift just gets rid of one of them, and it makes it more possible to just have, I think, more powerful experiences. And so that's pretty exciting, I think.
Great. So, is my mic still on? All right. So, we've talked, at Oculus, something we say a lot of the time is that this is really day zero for VR. And everything that you guys have seen is, prototype hardware, the development kits that we're shipping out. What do you guys think, if this is day zero, what are you hoping for day one and beyond that? Tough question.
Well, I think the big thing is there's going to be a lot of tinkering going on with this, right? That's, kind of the organic environment. And I think what needs to happen is the first killer app needs to emerge. And the beauty of this kind of community-driven development is one guy's going to do something over in, the UK, and then somebody's going to do one in Seattle. They're going to learn off of each other, and then we're going to start to see the good stuff rise and the bad stuff sink. And the community's hopefully going to get together in a warm, fuzzy way and learn from each other. And I'm a big believer of the fact that the next big thing in technology is the thing that slowly got better over time. And when you apply what we have now with the internet and community with this technology, the chance for it succeeding is exponentially higher right now. So I think it's all going to come down to that one moment where it's the killer app that emerges from that primordial ooze of the community.
You know, for me, I love PC as much as Chris does, and you know, it is just the most amazing place for innovation to happen. At the same time, when I think about the mass consumer, what I'm looking for the real day that VR breaks out is the all-in-one device. I don't want to plug it into anything. I just want to go to Toys R Us and buy a $400 or $300, whatever it is, put it on my head, plug it in, and I don't have to go on my PC to download a game or whatever. I just turn it on, and there's a shelf, and I pull a game off, and I put it in my cart, and I've downloaded it. And it comes with a controller, or it's just taking video of my hands, or however that works. When that finally happens, that's going to be the moment that I can create a game like Words with Friends, where it's targeting moms and wives and daughters and kids and adults and everyone in between. But when it stays when we're in this place now where it is the sort of pointy edge of innovation, it's tougher to do that.
I mean, I think you're right, actually. That is where things are going. I mean, mobile hardware right now isn't all that powerful. It can do things that you needed a gaming PC to do 5 years ago, and all of a sudden you have phones now. I have a phone that's a 2 gigahertz quad-core phone with 2 gigs of RAM. That's like the specs of a gaming rig not that many years ago. And in the next few years, things are going to get powerful enough where you do have devices that have all the rendering hardware on board, and everything is just an all-in-one kit. Everything can be built into the headset. You don't have to go out and buy a big PC and be tethered to it. And that doesn't only allow you to have a all-in-one experience, it lets you have something where you can actually go out and walk around where you're untethered. You can do it on your couch, on your bed, on a chair, or this idea of an arcade experience with a huge room. Maybe it's like laser tag, where you've got people running around a huge space and doing things virtually together that are much cooler than the empty room that they're actually in. That's something that'll become a lot more possible when it's all on the device.
So if one of you entrepreneurs out there wants to start the empty room business, it's going to be big in a couple of years.
No, I mean, the vision of the future, I mean, I agree. I mean, obviously I'm a PC fan, mostly because I think it's sort of the forefront of innovation, and it allows you to easily try things because you can always upgrade or change stuff. But ultimately, you need, it moves across into the mass market, and then you need it to be simpler and easier. And I kind of think what Palmer's talking about is what the future is. It's not yet, and it'll be a while, because it takes, there's a reason why PCs are this big and have huge water cooling setups and draw 600, 700, 800 watts of power, which you just can't put through a tablet. But not that far in the future, you'll basically have a device, and I don't know how small it is, but it won't be particularly big. You'll carry it around with you, and it'll link up. You own your living room, it'll link up to your TV, it'll link up to your controller, it'll link up to your Rift you'll put on, or you're on the plane, you can just be playing it on a smaller screen. You go into your office, it'll link up to your keyboard and your screen, and that's kind of how I think it will go in the future. I'm less of a believer fully in the cloud and more in what I'm just pitching right now, anyway, in the short term. And at that point, I think then it's pretty much universal, and it will be pretty cool and exciting. Right now it's really just how the prices go down and how the components get better, and so the thing I would like to see on a short term is even higher resolution on the 3D headset, lower latency on tracking, because it's really low, but it could be even lower.
It could definitely be lower.
Not that I'm an expert, but Palmer was giving me a lecture on how this is. I was like, it's pretty good. He's like, no, this sucks. By the way, you can get it down half this much.
You're right that I was right. Latency can be much lower. Latency is a big problem that we're working. Well, I don't want to say it's a big problem. It is a problem, and it can get better. We're already at a good point, but there's always room for improvement there. Higher resolution is something that luckily is going to happen independent of whatever we do. The display industry isn't being driven by Oculus. It's being, or even VR in general. It's being driven by the mobile phone industry, where it's all about
Thank you, Apple. Thank you, Samsung, for cranking out displays like this with ridiculous amounts of resolution.
Well, and thank consumers for thinking that higher numbers are always better. As long as that stays in place, resolution is going to be in a good mind. And I mean, like you said, the device you described, how cool would it be when everybody has a handheld mobile device with a lot of computing power and it can connect to a network? I mean, that will be a cool day.
Yep.
So we only have about less than 10 minutes left, and I do want to open it up to questions just a tiny bit in the last couple minutes. So to wrap up my last question, if you're in the audience today or you're an average gamer sitting at home, what's the one thing I should be most excited for in terms of VR, hopefully?
Oh, that's a good way to phrase this.
I'm worried about what you're going to say, Cliff.
You are going to finally have a portal to a million other new worlds that you can fully breathe and experience like a dream. I mean, it sounds like the back of the box shit, but it's true. And it's actually at the point where the technology is good enough and the price is good enough that it's no longer going to be a novelty. And we have a hell of a mission to try and crack this thing. I think it's creatives.
I think that the thing I'm most looking forward to, and I think Chris is probably going to be one of the first to deliver this, is the ability to experience the worlds that I love in a completely new way. And I mean, it's hard to describe, and you guys can go check out some of the demos and you can see it, but you just don't realize it. Like, for instance, we created this game and we're prototyping this thing, and on the screen we have this block, and it looks like a certain size. And you put on the Rift, and you look at this block, and it's like, holy crap, that thing is huge. You just don't even realize it. But when you're standing in front of it and you're looking at it, you're like, wow. And I think about these worlds that I've loved to play in my whole life, and the ability to see them from this new perspective, that's what I think we have most to look forward to.
I think the things I'm looking forward to, there's two things. One is hardware. The hardware we have right now, yes, it's impressive. Yes, people, they're really excited about it. You guys are excited about it, but it's going to get so much better. People try this, they say it's great, but there's so much better that we can do. So I'm a hardware nut, so I'm really excited about where hardware can go. The other thing is, I think Star Citizen will be a good example of this. A lot of what keeps people playing MMOs is not, oh, the gameplay is just so good, or, oh, I just love these graphics so much. It's because it's a shared experience. It's something that people can do together, and it's about that human relationship. When you have all of these people in the same space, really experiencing the same thing, it's not even like, whoa, well, I'm playing on a tablet and I'm playing on my PC, and I'm playing keyboard, I'm playing gamepad. Everyone's getting basically a similar unified experience. They're able to interact with themselves, not on a gaming level, but on a real human level. What does that mean for MMOs? I mean, I've never been a huge MMO person because I'm not that much of a social butterfly, but I actually do like to spend time with my friends. But what happens when technology gets so good that spending time in an MMO is better than actually being with someone in real life? And I think we're going to hit that point pretty fast.
Dicey. All right. Chris, you want to finish this off?
Actually, the one thing which I guess we're all sort of assuming, and maybe I should say for the audience, is the one thing that something like the Rift really does is, there's stereoscopic 3D was kind of something people want to do in the films, and then you saw it on TV. Generally, it works better for games because you're actually rendering the left and the right eye properly, but you still have the issue of crosstalk, even with active shutter displays. And when you're wearing the Rift, there is no crosstalk. It's much more natural. It's a proper 3D. And so the thing you get, besides just being able to look around an environment, is you get, which is sort of what I think you were referring to in terms of the size.
Yeah, scale.
You get this
Scale
sense
of
of
things.
scale, and
really
distance
surprising.
from you. And I have to say that, for me, even when in the early days when I was doing some prototyping on Star Citizen, I did some stereoscopic stuff, not even on the Rift, just a straight test. And if you ever go watch the 3D movie, generally they don't work that well. But the things that usually work well are like flying sequences, because there's a lot of there's discrete objects, and there's a lot of distance
separation
between them.
between the two.
Yeah, so it works really well. And so when I fired up the cockpit in 3D, and we actually had the HUD, and actually had the HUD program to do different things in 3D, so it was like Iron Man, where it would zoom and scope and target people. I was like, oh my God. And I went back to 2D, and it was completely flat. And it was a completely different experience than I felt when I would go to the theater and see 3D, because a lot of times I'll actually deliberately see a 2D film at a theater rather than a 3D film, because I don't like wearing the glasses, and it's usually, you lose a lot of light because you've got these passive glasses you're wearing. And so the moment I put that on, and I was like, oh my God. And then you take that with the Rift, which is a whole nother level, because it's just natural, you're looking around. It just really kind of feels incredibly powerful and immersive. And I think that's the thing that when you put it on, that's what you're the combination of the freedom of looking around, the movement, and the sense of size and distance and all the rest of the things just make everything step to the next level. And so yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a rift around here or people can get to it, but
I saw one
more
over there.
people that do that and feel that, I think, because you do that, you go, yeah, that's worth $300. And by the way, in a year's time or 2 years' time, the way things are going, that's gonna, it'll be a lot less than that.
Now it's 200. Now it's
Yeah.
99.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm always amazed by how much I can buy, like a printer that used to cost $2,000 or $3,000, and I'm getting these incredibly complicated printers for $200 or something.
And
So
now you
yeah,
have to buy a 3D printer now.
yeah, it's crazy.
Well,
So
and that
so it's
even
gonna be
comes with
great.
the unicorn blood ink, right?
Yes, we'll definitely get some unicorn blood ink. But no, it'll be great.
All right, so I am being signaled that we are out of time. Do we have time for one quick question?
Yes.
One quick question. All right, we'll take this guy right here.
Yeah, that
Can
guy's-
we run him a mic?
That guy's been stoked the whole panel.
I know.
You guys, I'm so stoked. Can you hear me? Sweet. I had earplugs in. Okay, back to the arcade. I really think that's a great idea.
I can't hear you.
Can't hear me? Okay, extra
like that.
close. Extra close. Okay. The arcade thing seems like such a great idea, and I think what would be even cooler than an empty room is a room with peripherals that you can scan into the game, and then you can be like, oh, I'm gonna go interact with this elephant over here, or here's the cockpit, and then you're interacting with like real life objects, and then you can use your actual senses to get closer to those. Imagine like scanning your girlfriend in and skinning her, and then you can like tap into the content of people instead of like the visuals. How do we get there? How do we get peripherals from like I'm holding a controller and connect that to the virtual reality experience of the Oculus or of other?
This is how we get there. When you wear an Oculus for the first time, and a lot of other people do, it's all of a sudden going to be obvious to all of us that this little controller just doesn't work anymore. That's going to drive that, I think.
So demand.
What you're describing is often called mixed reality. It's not augmented reality because you're not trying to overlay things on the real world. You're trying to show a fully virtual world while still having physical props that match up to what's in the virtual world. And that's actually something that I've experimented a bit with in my previous jobs, doing some military research and the like. You can do some really cool things, and actually it's a pretty established idea. Like when you have theater in between scene changes, you have people who are dressed in black, the stage ninjas, and their whole job is to run around and rearrange things. I could totally see a VR arcade where you have a set of VR stairs or a patio, and then a bunch of big rocks or something, and you just make them out of big safe foam, and you run around and you can set them all in between. And as people play, even you can have them being rearranged, put them on tape markers or something. I don't know. I'm not a stage ninja. How do they do that?
All right, Palmer, we got to wrap up. We're being
That'll be
booted
sweet.
off. All right, well, I want to thank our panelists once again, Cliff Blazinski, Paul Bettner, Palmer Luckey, and Chris Roberts. Thank you guys for being here, and thank everyone. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. Yeah, that's it. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
I'm going to take a picture of everyone.